I'm sorry, I'm just still not good with the numbers. Alhamdulillah.
Oh, okay, that's all right, Nora. I'm just gonna jot in 112. Okay, here we go. Lots to say, inshallah. So let's really quick just kind of just go over and just try to remember what we had done in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And of course, with Surah Al-Ma'idah, we're actually really close to finishing because we were doing the last pages of Surah Al-Ma'idah. So we actually did finish at least the theory of it, the general tafsir, because now, of course, we were trying to go to Tafsir al-Qurtubi to go in details, right? We finished with tafsir, the general tafsir, the whole surah, but now we're going to go back to Tafsir al-Qurtubi and go in the details of what تفسير القرطبي or القرطبي had basically said. So قالوا نريد أن نأكل منها وتطمئن قلوبنا ونعلم أن قد صدقتنا ونكون عليها من الشاهدين. So we said Al-Qurtubi was saying that the reason why they had requested the Last Supper, or at least the supper, by the way, it is worthy of mention that scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether this story in Surah Al-Ma'idah and when they had asked for the meal, whether that is the same story of the Last Supper or not. So just a note on that, whether that is the story of the Last Supper or whether there were two stories of different meals. And we could see in the New Testament in particular, the part about Prophet Isa alayhi salam eating, drinking, sharing meals, etc., was very common in the New Testament, whether we're speaking about that he had eaten some fish, he had shared it with people, or that he had actually also consumed alcohol. Well, of course, as Muslims, we don't believe that that is true, but we could see that consumption, food consumption, water, etc., that was very prevalent. So was this necessarily speaking about the Last Supper, or was this another story of another meal? Differences of opinions between scholars. And we talked about this one. قالوا نريد أن نأكل منها. They said we want to eat from it, and the reason تطمئن قلوبنا. And we said the part تطمئن قلوبنا, were they necessarily going in a moment of lack of certainty? Is this equivalent to how Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? So we're just doing a fast revision. Is this equivalent to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him, when he had requested to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects the dead, and he said قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن قلبي. Let me talk about the part about doubt, certainty in that area. So we said that there are three different stages of ilm. There's the theoretical piece of it, which is ilm al-yaqeen, and there's the haqq al-yaqeen. It's another stage of yaqeen, another stage of certainty. So where observation, perhaps experiment is involved, and that takes the person from the theoretical understanding of something, theoretical knowledge of something, to a second stage, which is haqq al-yaqeen, where the person is, let's say, bonding with whatever they're trying to study in a way that brings them some certainty, because they had recognized there's haqq al-yaqeen. They recognized that at close observation, experiment, and that created haqq al-yaqeen. And then finally, which is the Ayn al-Yaqeen. Ayn al-Yaqeen, it's kind of like when we're speaking about to believing is seeing, or seeing is believing. Okay. And that brings in the third stage of the type of yaqeen, where it's the final certainty, exactly like you could see something, where it becomes an unshakable, at least stage of certainty. Now, when we see these stages, it's important. Let's kind of write it down. Let's write it down really quick. So we're looking at ilm al-yaqeen, then we're looking at haqq al-yaqeen, and we're looking at ayn al-yaqeen. Okay. Now, are those ilm al-yaqeen, haqq al-yaqeen, ayn al-yaqeen, are we talking about knowledge in general, that this is what we basically live in? Is this talking about ilm al-yaqeen to mean, for example, a stage of Islam? So in the stage of Islam, the person is at least having some sense, some intellectual, theoretical shahada, let's say it that way, witness, or they're believing in Islam, at least a theory of it, they understand it, they embrace it, but that's the first level. That's, let's call it mental, relationship with whatever they're seeing around the world. So they understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, they understand the Quran is the book of Allah, they understand Muhammad ibn Abdullah is a prophet of Allah, etc. So they're believing in Islam, at least in the first stage, which is ilm al-yaqeen. Okay, is that what we consider as the first level of shahada? That's one way of looking at it, but that's not complete. Haqq al-yaqeen is another stage where the person cannot attain haqq al-yaqeen unless they embrace a certain level of commitment. Okay, that's the stage of iman. A certain stage of commitment, let's call it, it's blending observation, it's putting in experience, it's putting in some senses that are blending with the theory, with the mind, in order to live haqq al-yaqeen. And that's basically the stage of an iman. That's why in the stage of an iman, if you were to compare that with Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam is actually very important. Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, we talked about it very many times. In fact, it's probably one of the most important hadith in Aqidah. If you were to take that hadith as probably the most important hadith in Aqidah, the most important ayah in Aqidah is perhaps Ayat al-Kursi. The most important hadith in Aqidah is perhaps Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam. Okay, so in Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, you could see, let's actually take it again really quick and just see how they're correlated. So Hadith Jibreel, and let's see really quick with Hadith Jibreel, how it takes us to recognize different stages, different levels of faith, how we understand all of that. And we could see in this Hadith, let's see. So, okay, this one's actually the summary of it. Hold on, let's see this one. Here we go. This one should contain everything. Okay, I know it's kind of blurry. Maybe if I were to click on it, maybe it'll give me a, let's see, hopefully it'll give me a clear image where it's not too blurry. So let's see if it would give me that. No, hold on, I'll find one, I promise, inshallah. Let's see. We just want to Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam. Okay, and we just want to see that area within Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam. Here we go. This is not blurry. Okay, here we go. So if you look at this one, so Jibreel alayhi salam basically shows up in a human form. They don't see the impact of travel on him. None of us knew who he was. This man basically comes over, puts his knee right in front of the Prophet's knees, and then puts his palms over, was it his own thighs or was it the Prophet's thighs? Differences of opinions. Okay, and then he says, "Oh Muhammad, tell me about Islam." So that was the first thing. And then he said, Islam is to bear witness that there's no God worthy of worship, and Muhammad ﷺ is the Prophet of Allah. You perform the prayer, you give the zakah, you would fast Ramadan, you would do Hajj. Okay, and then he says, Sadaq, you're right. That's when the Sahaba that were, of course, the Sahaba the Sahabas that were there were confused or at least astonished to how is it that he's asking him a question, but then he would confirm the response that he had given. So it's either you're a teacher, it's either you're a student, but then to confirm an answer or a response is basically telling us that he's coming from a higher level because he's becoming right now the teacher right there. Then he asked about Iman. Tell us about Iman. And he said it's to believe in Allah, but he used the word an tu'mina versus here an tashhada. So this is an tashhada, and this is important to note in what we're talking about, because when you're talking about an tashhada, it's a type of witness, it's a type of an acknowledgement, but you want to remember when we said the word shahida, we went in details of before in the word shahida. Is it necessarily to witness on something, meaning to give some form of a testimony? This isn't the only meaning. It can also mean to know. It can also mean to give an order. It can also mean to acknowledge as well. So when you're looking at an tashhada, it's actually talking about this type of ilm al-yaqeen. There's an acknowledgement, there's a mental theoretical acknowledgement that you're recognizing, but that's not enough, because your theoretical acknowledgement, it actually has to come with some form of a relationship that you would perform on ground, because that's what is going to bring in another type of awareness about the world that you live in, about yourself, about the relationship of what you acknowledge. So that's why in this theoretical ilm or ilm al-yaqeen, it couldn't be just a theory that you would just believe in something, but you needed to put an investment to grow in another type of way, another type of awareness. This is important, because when we study in science, they would tell you basically that your brain is the place of awareness. Your brain is where all the information is processed. But according to Islam, that's not quite accurate. According to Islam, your brain, that area of theory, that's the beginning of acknowledgement and the beginning of acknowledging, or at least processing and understanding about the world around you. And that there is a further and a deeper insight that you would get to by, let's say, by stimulating this other type of awareness, or to stimulate that other type of tool to understand the world around you. You have to invest in some form of a training in bringing in this focus, whether it's in salah, it's in giving up on some of what your dopamine is so hooked on, whether it's money, whether it's dunya, whether it's to keep things. You're giving up on that in order to understand that what is even more important than that is really value. It's the value of morality. It's the value of wanting to hook yourself onto the akhirah. And then, of course, comes in with it is giving up on certain foods, giving up on certain things that your body would need, and whether it's sexual or whether it is food. And that's to stimulate another type of power, another type of potential, and that takes us to the other one, which is the level of Iman, which takes us to حق اليقين, and that's أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر. It's to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels, the books, the rusul, etc. Even though, how is that supposed to be the level of حق اليقين when there's no experiment, there's no observation? Because this observation is impossible to do with our own naked eye. And tu'mina billah, you're believing in Allah, and all of these things that were mentioned were actually supposed to be within the realm of the unseen. to see the angels and to believe in the angels, the books, the prophets, the judgment day, to believe in the decree, whether the evil or the good and all of that. How is that supposed to be another type of haqq al-yaqeen? You would not be capable of reaching haqq al-yaqeen unless you had invested all the different, let's call them training, mentioned in the Quran to actually get to this type of haqq al-yaqeen. And that's why to get to haqq al-yaqeen, you would see the Quran would tell you, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, and it would give you an instruction. What are you supposed to be doing? What did you want me to do? How am I supposed to, let's call it, remove the contaminations that are obstructing the vision from me reaching haqq al-yaqeen and making me so fixated on probably looking at the materialistic things. So what Islam is telling us, that yaqeen is to understand that this universe, that this world is actually farther than the surfaced understanding of it, which is the materialistic part. That this world reaches and extends farther than the materialistic things, whether it's money, whether it's life, whether it's what you're eating and what you're trying to consume, and telling you that no, there's actually something more important about this life, which is the purpose that preceded your existence in the hereafter, that is even more important than this life, because this life that you're living is considered one shorter in its time, in the span of it, and certainly even in the potentials that you will be having. This is nothing but a bridge to the hereafter, making the hereafter basically even more important than this dunya. And that's why that emphasis in the Quran is always عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم. It's always emphasizing the hereafter and telling you that that's actually supposed to be your area of focus. What you see in this world is rather not only temporary, but the whole laws of thermodynamics and everything just makes it wear away. Well, even you as a human being, when you die, you will simply just decompose, but it doesn't mean that you become into nothingness, because this life is not an absurd life, but there is a meaning to this life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking us to understand that haqq al-yaqeen and letting us know you will not get to understanding haqq al-yaqeen. And understanding that simply means you would detach yourself away from a lot of dunya in order to connect yourself to haqq al-yaqeen and recognizing al-akhirah by connecting, basically doing the training first. And that training will lead you to recognizing al-iman billah, al-malaika, al-kutub, al-rusul, al-yawm al-akhir, etc. And that's to get to haqq al-yaqeen. Now, ayn al-yaqeen, and that takes us to the other part, which is when he asked about al-ihsan. What is al-ihsan? And he said, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. It's to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's ayn al-yaqeen. كأنك تراه, as if you could see Allah. So it's living another stage of what certainty is. It's ayn al-yaqeen. It's a level where you had basically been so deeply connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with understanding akhirah, with understanding that this dunya is not as surfaced as people would see it, but you had recognized to see farther than haqq al-yaqeen, and now you're seeing one thing. You're seeing as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically surrounding you in each and every single direction. You're starting to see things in ayn al-yaqeen. Your certainty had grown so strong that you could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers in each and every single moment of your life, in each and every single corner, in each and every area you're living in ayn al-yaqeen. Now, is that, let's say, that categorization that we put all of this in, is that necessarily what the Hawariyin were trying to get to? They were trying to get to تطمئن قلوبنا. They were trying to get to طمأنينة, and from there they wanted that mu'jiza. And is this basically what and why Prophet Isa alayhi salam was telling them, اتقوا الله إن كنتم مؤمنين. If you really want to get to عين اليقين and wanted to basically get to that طمأنينة, what you really need to work on is taqwa. You want to feel that faith, you really need to invest in action. You want to feel the faith, you need to invest in action. That's what Prophet Isa alayhi salam was teaching them. And it's not an issue of, well, let me get a miracle. The miracles are there. But if you want to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to reach Ayn al-Yaqeen, it's not about getting a miracle. The miracles are there. The power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in each and every single corner. It's that your fixation on dunya is blocking you from seeing all the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, what they were trying to do was thinking that, okay, we can make things go faster. And that way we can cut corners and we don't have to work on, I guess, a lot of action. And we can perhaps connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala faster by getting a miracle. And that way we can cut corners and get to Ayn al-Yaqeen without putting in a lot of action. We already have faith. And that's what many would think. That, yeah, we have faith. So yeah, right now we got to the end of it. But what they don't recognize is that there's no way that you can have this type of faith unless you had actually invested a lot of commitment. There's no way. And that takes me to, let's just remember this page number. Just give me a second. Okay, Minnesotans, let me just tell you a secret.
Can you say salam to TikTok too?
Assalamu alaikum to TikTok too. And let me tell you why I kind of paused, Minnesotans. It was because I had to turn off the AC. It was getting too cold. It is 89 degrees Fahrenheit, Minnesotans and people in America. So just wanted to let you know what Malaysia feels like. 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Picture that. Okay, enough about our advertisement. Let's get back to work. In Minnesotans, can you please share and can you tell me what your temperature is in Minnesota? Anybody from Minnesota?
She's just hiding the fact that she gets so hot over there. Just, you have to be honest.
Very, very, that is very true, Noura. That's extremely true. You know, you would take 2 and 3 showers here, but I just have to somehow not admit the fact that we can get really hot here. But, you know, when you compare it to the extreme cold in Minnesota, you're like, I'm okay with that. All right, let's continue right there. But yeah, alhamdulillah, ya Rabbi. Ya Rabbi ينعم علينا يا Rabbi and ينعم عليكم, all of you, give you all the ni'am and give you all il-hidayah, give us all hidayah, give us all, Ya Rabbi, the steadfastness, and make us always be of those that would recognize the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, where was I? قالوا نريد أن نأكل منها وتطمئن قلوبنا. I actually wanted to take you to Surah al-Hujurat. Okay. Was it Surah al-Hujurat? Is it Surah al-Hujurat? Yeah, in Surah al-Hujurat. Okay. Okay. And in Surah Al-Hujurat, there's a very important piece of it. I want you to look at this one. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلدكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون. This ayah is key to what we're talking about. قالت الأعراب آمنا. So who are الأعراب? الأعراب are basically the nomads. They came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, we're آمنا. We are faithful. We are right now amongst the faithful ones, amongst the mu'mineen. But then the ayah said, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Don't say that you had bonded to faith yet. In other words, reach the level of Iman, but say we had submitted ourselves. In other words, we are now Muslim and not necessarily mu'min. And then the ayah said, وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. As a matter of fact, faith and the level of faith and the stage of faith did not yet enter your hearts. It didn't say enter your mind, it said enter your heart. وَإِن تُطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ لَا يَلِدْكُم مِّنْ أَعْمَالِكُمْ شَيْئًا. Okay, so what is that telling us? That in the level of ilm al-yaqeen, it was basically a word of acknowledgement. It said, قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. It was a word of acknowledgement. Yes, the person lived in some kind of theory, or at least bonded with the theory, with acknowledging the idea. But then in the stage of Iman, it's another place of processing. In the stage of Haqq al-Yaqeen, that processing is actually happening in the heart and not in the brain. That's quite interesting. So what the Quran is telling us is that the brain basically does a certain type of processing. The heart processes a different thing, but the heart and what it processes is basically related to what actions we carry out. And in order to have the heart process certain information, there's a certain investment of action that you basically had to do. Think of it as in order to invest or to understand certain things, they'll tell you need to work out. And in order to work out, your body is going to be capable of processing certain information, etc. But the Quran was telling us, well, it's not just physical workout, but there's another type of workout. And that's why it said, إن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلدكم من أعمالكم شيئا. If you were to obey Allah and His Messenger, لا يلدكم من أعمالكم شيئا. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not disregard any of your actions. In other words, it will invest towards clarity that your heart will basically reach into understanding. And then, Inna Allah ghafur rahim, for the Lord Almighty is all forgiving and all merciful. So who is a believer after all? So this ayah is saying, Innama, verily. Here comes in the definition to answer the question. Verily, the believers are the ones. Now here comes in that definition. Though are the ones that believed in Allah, believed in His Prophet, and look at the word thumma. Thumma is telling us that there's a time lapse, because the word thumma is not like the letter fa, is not like the letter wa. Because the letter fa tells me that there's an automatic transition, but the word thumma tells us that there was a lot of investment, that there was a time lapse, that things don't happen with a snap. So not just because you had made your shahada, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right now living in the stage of Iman. Yes, you might actually feel that every time you were to stand for your salah, that you are connecting with your salah, etc. But guess what? In order, there's going to come I always tell this to the new converts. They would feel a strong relationship the first year. And then the second year, they all of a sudden feel that things got so normalized that they actually had lost this light. And then they would feel that everything's gone. What happened? I was so happy when I first became Muslim. Right now, I don't feel the same bond, the same connection anymore. And now it feels like I need to search for Islam within Islam. And this is very common, I would say, certainly, because in the beginning, it was giving you this movement, this transition from the area of darkness to the area of ilm al-yaqeen. But now there's that thumma that you're in. That thumma, to transition from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen, that's that area of thumma. How do I get to that transition? وَلَمْ يَرْتَابُوا. You have to live with certainty. And how do I get to certainty is the question. You're supposed to put in لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, in other words, invest in commitment. Invest in being steadfast. Invest in being strong. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. The word al-jihad. What is jihad? There's so much to compromise. If you really want to al-akhirah, there's so much to compromise, to give up on a lot of your wealth, to give up on a lot of what you probably liked. And you probably liked fame, you probably liked shopping, you probably invested a lot of time in probably listening to music and hanging out with friends and hanging out with all of that. Well, there's no way that your Islam is going to stay strong if you basically are still living within your dunya. So you have to compromise on a lot of what you love out of your wealth, out of your own nafs. Yes, your own nafs is probably liking that attention from guys, attention from girls, etc. All of that, that's the nafs. You want to go from the stage of living Islam to living in Iman, then you would have to change the friends that you're surrounding yourself with. You have to now live in al-hub fillah. You would have to now live surrounding yourself with salihin. Now you're living, instead of investing in this dunya, you're investing in an akhirah. That's what it means to do jihad. There's no way that you want the akhirah, but you're investing in this dunya. And that's why the ayah is emphasizing جَهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. Those are the ones that are truly honest and truly, the word is sidq. What is a sidq? A sidq is not honesty in a word of mouth. Because a sidq in a word of mouth, that was ilm al-yaqeen. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. That was ilm al-yaqeen. But a sidq in fi'l, in action, that was the second stage of haqq al-yaqeen. الصدق في الفعل. It's the honesty, it's the commitment in action. And remember, actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. So that's why the ayah is emphasizing أولئك هم الصادقون. Because at the end, if you want to go from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen, it's putting in that investment and basically taking yourself from the level of thinking that all I need is a miracle. The miracles are out there. There's no way that you can transition and be from the level of thumma and get into that stage of haqq al-yaqeen unless thumma lam yartabu wa jahadu bi amwalihim wa anfusihim. That's the secret to getting from stage علم اليقين to حق اليقين. It's basically by investing in, let's say, waking up those cells within your heart, and waking up those cells requires that you would put in a certain action. And that's why they'll tell you, hey, there's certain workout that you would basically have to do in order to stimulate certain things in your brain or certain things probably in your body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that there are certain things that cannot be stimulated within your heart unless, certainly right now we're just, I guess, in a society that's just so focused on stimulating the body, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, yes, that's important, but there's another type of stimulation, which is a spiritual stimulation, which is a mental stimulation, and it's basically that stimulation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to do within our heart. Within our heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us the story in order to let us know that Al-Hawariyin thought if we were to get a miracle that's going to transition our faith, but Prophet Isa alayhi salam was teaching us, اتقوا الله إن كنتم مؤمنين. If you were truly mu'minin, which is living حق اليقين, here's what you need to practice in. You need to practice in commitment, in having the fear, in having that religious, spiritual integrity to really live based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how you would transition yourself from being a person that is just living in Islam to going farther in living al-Iman. Then you would need to invest in taqwa Allah. Okay, so this is extremely important to understand within and between the lines. What are we trying to, I guess, learn from the story of Al-Ma'idah, and what is it actually, and where is it taking us, and what is it really telling us? So right there, certainly, in the books of Tafseer, they'll tell you were they trying to ask for a miracle because they needed one, or did they really want a miracle, or what was it? But then, of course, that تطمئن قلوبنا, and also how Prophet Isa alayhi salam was telling them, اتقوا الله, was really telling them to live that moment of understanding that in order to grow from علم اليقين to حق اليقين, you really need to invest in taqwa Allah and get into that iman. Okay. قال عيسى ابن مريم اللهم ربنا أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين. We went in details with this ayah, and we said Prophet Isa alayhi salam makes the dua to basically send down the food, but then was it necessarily a food on a specific type? And all of those we had mentioned before, we don't really have enough evidence to prove what kind of meal, how was it sent, etc. At the end, just remember that it was to commemorate, at least to commemorate that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets people see, and this is important, to commemorate, yaqeen is the most important commemoration. The most important thing to invest in is getting al-yaqeen. In other words, what's the mission that I should work towards? We would usually work towards perhaps getting a degree, which is fine, maybe making a good investment in our business, etc. All of those different things, those are definitely, or maybe an anniversary, the day we got married, etc. But what Prophet Isa alayhi salam was teaching us to commemorate the most was really that time, تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا, is basically that moment when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would answer our dua. That's the most important time to remember, is the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered our dua, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically been content over us. Because if He answered your dua, that is one sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had been content over you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accepting you. And if your dua is not answered, or if you're still struggling to transition from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen, or you're living a moment of uncertainty, even in ilm al-yaqeen, probably falling out a number of different times, then you never know when death would come, when you're completely out of ilm al-yaqeen and probably out entirely. And then what that would mean is basically nothing to commemorate but al-akhirah, nas'allah al-afwa al-afiyah, would basically be the ending in hellfire, nas'allah al-afwa al-afiyah. So here Prophet Isa alayhi salam, تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك. I want you to look at the لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك, to commemorate the day, but it's not just us, but it's also the generations to come. And this is important. Even though Prophet Isa alayhi salam never got married, but recognized that the most important investment we would invest in is basically the generations to come would recognize that there was a lot of commitment that was done. And I was listening to this podcast. Maybe I could show you that podcast, and because I really recommend it. This podcast, hold on, let me open it up to show it for you. And I think that was outstanding podcast. Let me share it right there.
Your support is vital. Yes, family.
Well, not that was an ad. Okay, hold on. Let me skip that one. I think this podcast that I was listening to, I would really want to share it. Hold on. Let me show you that podcast in order for you to see it. Here we go. This is it. Okay, this podcast right there was basically talking about studying Islamic history, and I think he had done an outstanding job. And one of the things, at least I'll quote the idea, he was talking about that many times we would think about Islamic history as a story to tell and not necessarily a future to live. And he was also talking about how many times we would talk about the Khilafah and not recognize that the Khilafah is not necessarily just a word to say, but it's actually an investment of what we can contribute to make it happen. And he goes in details of how we could live that. So definitely, I really encourage listening to this podcast. So that's a different story. But what I want to get to from this idea is going into from that تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك. It's how we would see history and how we would recognize that whatever we would invest today is going to have its impact for tomorrow, whether in
Oh
our
yeah, sorry,
normal-
Dr. Aisha. That reminds me about Ustada Alia, her Islamic history course.
Tell me
Sorry.
about it.
No, it's the first 200 years after the Hijrah.
Okay.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So what I wanted to say is that when we look at history, we usually think of it as past, but the reason why we're studying history, if you look at even the Quran, it's talking about studying basically the story of the prophets and all of that in order to let us know that this is how the story begins, but how do you continue your part of the story for the mission of La ilaha illallah? And that's that point. How is this going to be the part of the story of how the story had begun, or how the story at one point, that investment or seeking to basically live that transition from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen. And Prophet Isa alayhi salam was telling me, hey, I want you to have taqwa. If you really want to transition to get into that tama'nina, well, good. You really want to transition from being Muslim to being mu'min. Don't think it's about getting more and more miracles. The miracles are there. It's transitioning from letting your eyes see the surface of things to letting your hearts see the deeper connection between what this dunya is all about and the akhirah and the purpose that preceded this existence. That's what it's all about. That's what really is that most important area, and that area that you should be focused on. And that's why he said, تَكُونُ لَنَا عِيدًا. It's to recognize that this story of Al-Ma'idah is a story, and not necessarily just to say, but is a story to recognize that it's not necessarily a miracle that will transition you from that ilm al-yaqeen to ayn al-yaqeen, but it's an investment for the generations to live on a mission for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever mission you would invest in today, as a parent, your children will be the ones to continue on to the mission. You have to put in that investment to let them recognize that there's so much for you to build. There's so much for you to commemorate, that the most important mission that we would live based on, that we would connect to, is the mission that we would try to get the ummah into transitioning from ilm al-yaqeen to ayn al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen wa haqq al-yaqeen to ayn al-yaqeen. And that's عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك. It's to let that be as the story that we would recognize that for the future, that we've got a mission, which is a mission to invest within the society for the sake of Tawheed. وَارْزُقْنَا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. Notice that he could have said, أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين, but that's not what he said. He could have just said that first, and since you're making a dua for food, it would make more sense to say وارزقنا right away. But he was saying تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك, because it wasn't the food that was important. It was actually that commemoration, that investment, that we would recognize that whatever happens to us, the du'as that we would invest in, the investment of, let's say, what brings haqq al-yaqeen, that's mainly what matters. So if we managed to make things work out, we would usually ask the question, well, where did we fail in history? And this is problematic, because if we were, certainly we have to ask the question, well, where did things go wrong? But I think we had gotten so used to asking the question, where did we fail, that our children would only see that Islamic history was nothing but a failure, and not, well, what did we invest as an ummah? What did the Muslims invest historically, and even during our modern times, what did they invest in making this world a place of civilization, a place of peace, a place of all the different investments that we had done? So asking the question and changing the question from where did we fail to what did we succeed in order to maintain what we were successful in and correct where we had gone wrong. And this is important. Sometimes to hold a conversation with the children even. Where do you think we're doing, and what do you think we're doing good in, and where do you think we need to correct? And to let the children feel that they too are investing within the home to make a better place, that they too are basically contributors, and they too are basically becoming adults and investing within this home. And تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا. And it's not only speaking about the past and speaking about the older generation, this is what they had done, etc. And of course, certainly, it's important to be aware and awaken, because many times when we're studying Islamic history, we could see that Orientalists had done so much in making us think that Islamic history was all about bloodshed, was all about killing, was all about sultans basically fighting over some kind of a throne, and etc. And then not recognizing that no, there was a lot more investment than those areas of perhaps that areas that basically went wrong. There was a lot of justice. There was a lot of peace. There was a lot of investment in ilm, in fiqh, in certainly in the society, and certainly there was also a political investment as well. And yet oftentimes, of course, where there's this in another podcast and with the same I guess that thinking Muslim, you would basically done, I think I told you about I think her name was Amira, was it? Amina. Let's see, I'm gonna get you her name, Amina Sharif or something, Amina Sharif, and she had done a podcast with him and done an outstanding job, to be honest. And let me see if I can find her, because she was talking about, well, what really happened within our own society. This podcast right there. Let me share it with you, because I actually think, right now, like never before, we're seeing Muslims that are very intellectual, and mashallah, doing an outstanding job like never before in bringing in our awareness, our understanding, and coming in from a package that's probably well studied and well educated from the Western resources and also the Muslim resources. Definitely check out this podcast, because she had done an excellent job in talking about not only British schools, but talking about the West and how the younger generation is influenced, whether it's subliminal influence or whether it's, let's say, open influence, and whether it's an agenda, and the list goes on, and where we would consider that there's some white supremacy, or at least with this, basically comes another psychology in making the Muslim younger generation feel that they cannot whatsoever be successful, or at least be advanced, unless they would have this sense of belonging to the Western supremacy. And this is extremely important to actually learn of how this happens. And she did this thorough study in relationship to what really happens to the younger generation, whether psychologically or even in relationship to their identity and living within the West. And hey, what about living in Muslim countries? Are we under the same influence? What really had happened? Really want you to study that one as well. And just check her out. Okay, let's continue with our tafsir. I know I'm probably advertising those podcasts, and I really want you to go to it. Okay, let's continue right there. So تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك. So there's that piece, آية منك. Remember, علم اليقين, حق اليقين, آية منك. It's to recognize basically the different powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we actually recognize that? It's basically seeing through the different things that surround you and recognizing Asma Allah al-Husna, recognizing the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to be honest, I think one of the most important books, it was translated, at least not thoroughly, the summary of it was translated for Asma Allah al-Husna. It was for Abdul Razak al-Badr. Is that his name? Yeah, Abdul Razak al-Badr, for Asma Allah al-Husna. The translator basically translated, I would say, perhaps maybe 20% of it, but the book is almost in 400 pages. But I don't think there was any book ever written in regards to Asma Allah al-Husna better than that book.
And you said that's in English?
It's in Arabic, but there is the
Oh.
summarized translation in English, Noura. Yes, it is available, at least in the summary, in English. And it's
Oh, okay.
available for free in PDF.
Oh, okay. Maybe
Yeah,
you could say the
so
title one more time. Sorry.
let me actually search for it really quick. Maybe I could find it. So maybe I could say Asma'ullahi al-Husna, and al-Husna, maybe let's say it that way, and PDF, maybe a PDF, and maybe al-Badr, okay, al-Badr, maybe that'll probably help me find it. Let's go like that. Maybe we could say, is that it? No. Oh, maybe someone can help us find it.
فقه الأسماء الحسنى عبد
Is it?
الرزاق بن عبد المحسن البدر.
Okay. فقه أسماء الله الحسنى. أسماء الله الحسنى. Here we go.
الأسماء الحسنى.
Good job. Good job. Here we go. I think this is it.
Yeah.
I think this is it. Oh, wow. Look at it. So now they even have it in all these lectures. Really cool. This is basically a mukhtasar. See, they even did it as a mukhtasar right there. And Kitab Allah Asma Allah al-Husna PDF. And yeah, let's see. There we go. This
Jazakallah
is
khair.
definitely a great book, Nora. A great book. And you definitely need to see that book. Even though like it's a complete summary, but still, I think, hey, a summary is better than not getting anything at all. And I think, I mean, I've seen Aqidah books, but I'll tell you, a lot of the Aqidah books, I think they sometimes get to so much in theory that you really lose that deep connection with Aqidah because they get invested in so much about what's a bid'ah and how not to think, but then they lose that connection. Well, how to think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what Abdul Razak al-Badr had really done, which is not the usual Salafi way, but I think he did an outstanding job in letting us know, well, how do we connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we transition from ilm al-yaqeen to haqq al-yaqeen? And there's no way that you could just talk about, well, I want you to do a certain training. I want you to, here's what, the list of do's and don'ts. It's not an issue of just list of do's and don'ts. That's one piece of it. The list of do's and don'ts, that's one side of it, but that's not the only area of what you need to do. This is not a Jewish way in Islam. It's a list of do's and don'ts, certainly, and those are to help you find that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with al-akhirah, but it's really invested in understanding Asma Allah al-Husna. That's the key thing. And that's why you could see وَآيَةً مِنْكَ. Certainly, that ayatan mink, it's to let you know, to really recognize the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to really be able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and transition from that haqq al-yaqeen to ayn al-yaqeen. You really need to start seeing the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by understanding, well, who is Allah? What am I searching for? What are the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do I understand the names? It's not how do I understand the name in theory, but how do I relate the name where I could sense Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers in the world around me. So that's why he used the name وَارْزُقْنَا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. There's that word. وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. It's to let them recognize that in order for you to transition, you need to see the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in order for you to see that, you would have to recognize the fi'l, the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do I understand the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've got some names that are a reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's action. And you got other names, the reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, basically. Okay. So some names, they're related to action. And that's the beginning. The beginning of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, let's call it as the first understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to relate to action. You see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Khaliq. He's the creator because you could see creation. He's a Raziq because you could see provisions. He is a Samir. Well, how do I know if he's a Samir? You could hear sound. Well, I made the dua. He answered my dua. I'm now capable of seeing that I was heard. Now I'm capable of seeing them. How do I recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah, the God? How do I get to that level? Well, you would get to that level by first recognizing the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you recognize the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you'll get to that other stage of recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And that's why in the stage of Ayn al-Yaqeen, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. It's to worship Allah, the deity, the God, as if you could see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't say أن تعبد الخالق. He didn't say as if it's to worship the creator. Because now you're going into from حق اليقين to عين اليقين. You're right now transitioning from making that ibadah where you're recognizing through حق اليقين, in the stage of حق اليقين, you're recognizing the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why you're putting in that commitment. But in عين اليقين, you had grown so much in your maturity in understanding and processing the relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And right now you're living وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. You're living Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. It's basically the best of those that would give a rizq. قال الله إني منزلها عليكم فمن يكفر منكم بعد منكم فإني أعذبه عذابا لا أعذبه أحدا من العالمين. Okay, so should we actually, I know we kind of went in details. Let's stop right here because there's so much to say. قال إني منزلها عليكم. So
this has been an amazing tafseer, subhanallah. Jazakallah khair.
Allah يحفظك.
Alhamdulillah.
So we're going to stop right here because I know that حق اليقين and عين اليقين and علم اليقين, that was actually key. And the Mufassirin didn't actually go in details with that. And they did go in other details and in at least in the wording. But I thought it would be important to speak about the unspoken, let's say it that way, in the tafsir of these ayat. So hopefully, inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow in speaking about the details. Well, was it sent down? What really happened? And so forth. And inshallah, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. Oh, mashallah, they started out as 12 people.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
ربي يحفظها أحلام. أحلام is my cousin. Allah يحفظها.
Oh, I forgot to share it on Facebook. Sorry.
Don't worry, I shared it on WhatsApp. So yeah, but mashallah, I could see.
I need to create an event on Facebook so it's like every day at that time and people can join, but they can always join on our website.
Inshallah. Dr. Karima wants to say something. Dr. Karima, go ahead, dear.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Aisha. How are you tonight?
Very good, alhamdulillah. Well,
Alhamdulillah.
it's afternoon right now.
Oh yeah. I forgot you're on the other side of the planet.
There you go, planet, exactly.
Yeah, this was really good tonight. Alhamdulillah, I have a clearer understanding of the Ma'idah story and the take-home message. I mean, it was really good tonight. I plan on listening to this lecture again. Hopefully I'll find it on your YouTube channel and just listen to it again because it was really good and I really want it to sink in. But you can
find it under the her live broadcasts on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Okay. Jazakallah khair. So the other day, you know that scientist, he's kind of popular, Neil deGrasse Tyson, that
Okay,
astrophysicist.
yep.
He made this Twitter post asking this question. It's so funny that athletes always thank God when they win, but you never hear them thanking God or attributing God when they lose. Why do you think that is? That was his question. And relating that to the lesson tonight about answered du'as and having yaqeen, like what is the Islamic response to that question that we do thank Allah when our dua is answered, but when we lose, we don't say, we don't like really thank Allah. I mean, you get what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but you want to remember O'Neill is very atheist, so he's always trying to promote his atheism.
Yeah, super atheist.
Super atheist, very, always that. But there is another group that is challenging the atheist agenda, and they're actually a group of scientists, by the way, but they are, I would say, one, not as promoted as the atheist group. So the atheist group right now, I would say, is more of a lobby, and they definitely have their platform.
A Zionist lobby. I'm going to say it.
I don't know if it's a Zionist per se, Noura. No, I don't necessarily agree with that. Not all of them are Zionist. No, Zionism is more of a political thing, but no, atheist it's a different thing. So if you're looking at new atheism, that's it's a different group in a different way. Not all of them. Some of them are actually pro-Palestine, so not necessarily that, but that's a different question. So when you're looking at, I would say, the group that is doing an outstanding job in challenging atheism, we've got some Muslims and we've got some that are not Muslim. And I think the non-Muslim group is definitely, perhaps the non-Muslim group / the Christian group is probably doing a better job than the Muslims. We do have Muslims that are, I guess, coming and learning how to, I guess, set, let's say, a Muslim discourse in that regards. And I would say Hamza Soros and his group, forgot what I think they're called. Forgot what they were called. But they're the ones that, Aspian, was it? I don't know. Ahlam, help me. They're Hamza Soros and his group. They've got, hold on, maybe I can, let's see, Hamza Soros. I hope I'm writing his name right. Okay. And let's see, okay, I know that he's part of some group. Hold on. What's it? Aspian or something like that.
It's SAPIENCE Institute.
Say it again, Nudas. SP what?
Sapien Institute.
Sapien, this one?
Sapien Institute?
Yeah, like
Okay.
it's CE, not S.
So CE Sapien, Nuda?
Okay, let me just type in the chat because it's kind of hard to pronounce.
Is that it? I think this is it. I think I got it. Am I right, Nuda? Is this it? Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. I think I found it. I think they're doing an outstanding job, but I must say we still have a lot to do. We still have a lot to learn from the different groups. I think Yaqeen Institute is trying to invest, despite all those that are probably trying to, I would say, deconstruct all the efforts. I think if you disagree with a Muslim organization rather than deconstructing the organization, hey, invest in making something better. If you think a certain organization is failing in addressing, let's say, certain misconceptions, it's very important to recognize that, one, instead of deconstructing it, hey, construct something else and construct something better. They're trying to bring in, I guess, different speakers. They're trying to do Yaqeen Institute. I would say, yes, I may disagree with some things, but I think it's not fair to always emphasize what you disagree with certain institutions or with all the different work, because it's so easy to present yourself like you know everything and not acknowledge that they had done a lot of good work out there, especially for the younger generation that's looking for answers, that's looking for ilm, and it's also bringing in the different intellectuals that are in different fields of science and actually present them and put them where they really belong. And certainly sometimes some of those specialists, sometimes they definitely may miss out and not recognize the Western, let's say, influence within their thoughts, and then they would think that just because I'm Muslim and that I'm presenting something new, sometimes they are not well versed in knowing the Islamic sciences in relationship to whatever misconception that they're trying to tackle. So that's one other thing that we probably need to invest in. But I am actually very optimistic in seeing a lot of Muslims from East and West, to be honest, East and West right now coming in together to bring in, let's say, a change, because when I earlier said that the Christians, whether we're speaking about perhaps maybe William Lane Craig, we're speaking about perhaps, different figures, I would say John Lennox and other ones. John Lennox is probably my favorite, to be honest. I absolutely love the calmness that he speaks in. You could see a fatherly figure in him. Definitely, you just ought to respect him in the way that he presents his thoughts and doesn't come in attacking even those that would oppose his views. And even when he is in a debate, he would speak in such a serene way that you just gotta give him respect. Even though he's definitely very Christian, but I love the way he presents the ideas. And of course, when we're speaking about, well, why did the Christian side, I would say, have a better organized discussion? Well, that's because new atheism was only presented within the Muslim community really recently, but within the Christian world, they were tackling these misconceptions for a very long time. You're talking about R.C. Sproul, you're talking about certain figures. They had been tackling all these thoughts, and they had been coming in to, I guess, challenge these thoughts for quite a while. But the Muslims, these misconceptions and the Muslim generations were not actually taking in, or at least finding, new atheism as a misconception as much as they're finding it now. And because of this new challenge, that basically brought in the younger generation. So you're seeing the younger generation, you know, right now, Hamza Tzoris, we're seeing Abdullah al-Ajiri, we're seeing a younger scholars or younger طلاب علم at least coming in, learning from what I guess some of the Christian scholars had presented in challenging the philosophy of new atheism or even the science of it, etc., and presenting that. So I hope I answered that one. I know there's so much to say. My husband would definitely, since he's the scholar on this field, wrote almost 8 books just on atheism. I'm definitely not well versed as much as he is. So I'm just really here giving you some of what I had learned from him, really. And I'm not a scholar on this whatsoever. So I'm here, you know, presenting what I had really learned from him, but I'm definitely not the scholar on this. So I'm just giving you some resources, but I'm definitely not the scholar on this to answer this question.
No, that's okay. Good. Alhamdulillah. I appreciate that. I will never forget the day I learned about the links of the feminism movement and feminism and atheism. I mean, I had no idea.
You mean, is that one lecture that I gave?
I remember it was at Gems of Light over on that other building on
Central Avenue. Yep.
Yeah, it was one day.
You know, alhamdulillah, I had actually done that lecture a couple times, and alhamdulillah, we got a lot of good responses, and even from non-Muslims too.
Wow.
Yeah, even from non-Muslims, and to see that correlation, well, how did we actually get that far? How did, you know, we usually think of atheism just an idea that separates religion from state, or at least secularism basically separates religion from state, and that's the end of it. But we don't usually recognize that, no, atheism also has a certain legislature on ground, that there you cannot just say God doesn't exist and just end it from there, and just basically think, okay, well, that's it. We got that out of the story. Now we can live in a legislature where we can create our own, and where everyone is accepting it, and just make it as a democracy, because it actually goes farther than that, because we're speaking about, well, what defines justice? Who defines justice? And how do we understand justice? And, well, how can we make the definition of justice be something that, you know, have a reality where we're relating, well, why do I have to live in justice? From, if we say that there is no God, well, why do I have to live it? Well, then I would have to maximize my happiness, even if it was at the expense of other people's happiness, because, hey, there's no hereafter after all, and therefore there's no truth. So let me live my own way of what maximizes my truth, which is what I would feel is maximizing my happiness, even if it's at the expense of other people's happiness.
Yeah.
So,
And that causes so many problems and fuels so many movements that I mean, its hand creeps into almost everything in this modern society.
there is a book I read for my husband. It basically just talks about the implication of atheism. It's in English. It's in Arabic, sorry, not in English, but I know we're looking for translators to translate that book. I think it was translated into other languages, but not English yet. But it's basically just talking about the implication of atheism, where in, you know, where does that end? Where does that lead to? What is the implication of atheism? So what are we really, where are we going if we were to say atheism is true? What is the implication on the individual and even on the society? And it's quite interesting, because in the book, he doesn't actually talk about the implication in theory, but he actually brings in the different scientists and in things in nature and what nature would tell us and what scientists would tell us and all of these different things. Quite interesting. Maybe inshallah down the road it'll get translated and find its way to the English audience, or at least English speaking audience. So inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. I